The Day of the Dog by Anderson Horne. They came home from a strange journey, and heroes they might have been, a little dog and a man. Carol stared glumly at the ship-to-shore transmitter. "I hate being out here in the middle of the Caribbean with no radio communication. Can't you fix it?" "This is a year for sunspots, and transmission usually gets impossible around dusk," Bill explained. "It will be all right in the morning. If you want to listen to the radio, you can use the portable radio directional finder. That always works." "I want to catch the 5 o'clock news and hear the latest on our satellite," Carol replied. She went to the RDF and switched it on to the standard broadcast channel. "Anyhow, I'd feel better if we could put out a signal. The way we're limping along with the water in our gas is no fun. It will take us 20 hours to get back to Nassau the way we're losing RPMs." Bill Anderson looked at his young, pretty wife and smiled. "You're behaving like a tenderfoot. We have plenty of gas, a good boat and perfect weather. Tomorrow morning I'll clean out our carburetors and we'll pick up speed. Meantime, we're about to enter one of the prettiest harbors in the Bahamas. Throw over anchor." The RDF drowned him out. The world is anxiously awaiting the return of the chamber from the world's first manned satellite launched by the United States 10 days ago. The world also awaits the answers to two questions. Is there any chance that Robert Joy, the volunteer scientist who went up in the satellite, is still living? There seems to be little hope for his survival since radio communication from him stopped 3 days ago. Timing mechanism for the ejection of Joy are set for tonight. And that's the second question. Will the satellite, still in its orbit, eject the chamber containing Joy? Will it eject the chamber as scheduled, and will the chamber arrive at Earth at the designated place? There are so many ifs to this project which is shrouded in secrecy. The President himself has assured us of a free flow of news once the chamber has been recovered, and this station will be standing by to bring you a full report. Carol switched the radio off. "Do you think he's still alive?" She suppressed a shudder. "God! Think of a human being up there in that thing." "Well, the dog lived for several days. It was just a question of getting it back, which the Russians couldn't do. I don't know about Joy. He sounded real cheerful and healthy until his broadcast stopped." Bill peered into the fading twilight. "Come on now, let's put our minds to getting the hook over." They concentrated on the tricky entrance to the lee side of Little Harbor Key. It meant finding and passing a treacherous coral head north of the joining frozen key. Little Harbor Key was midway in the chain of the Berry Islands, which stretched to the north like beads in a necklace. "There's the cove," called Carol. About a mile of coastline ahead was the small native settlement. Once the center of a thriving sponge industry, the island was now practically deserted. A handful of cottages, a pile of conch shells on the beach, and 2 fishing smacks gave evidence of a remaining, though sparse, population. Dusk was rapidly approaching, and Carol strained her eyes against the failing light. Bill heard her call his name, and saw her pointing, not ahead to their anchorage, but amidships and toward the sky. He turned his eyes to where she was indicating and saw a dullish object in the sky, some 1,000 feet up. The object seemed to be falling leisurely towards Earth. "What in the world is that?" asked Bill. "It's not a bird, that's for sure." The object seemed to be parachuting, not free-falling. The breezes were blowing it towards the island. Before they could study it further, it was lost in the lowering dusk and darkness of the shoreline. "Looks like a ball on a parachute," Bill finally said. However, the business at hand was to make secure the 7 seas, and together they spent the next quarter hour anchoring. After setting the hook securely, Carol and Bill donned swimsuits, dove overboard and swam lazily the 300 yards into shore. "Let's try to find that thing we saw. It shouldn't be too far from here," said Carol, the moment they hit the beach. They climbed inland on the rocky island. Little green lizards scooted underfoot and vines scratched at their ankles. Bill was leading, when suddenly he called, "Carol, I see something up ahead." "There's something lying on the ground." He hurried toward what he had seen. The dying sun reflected on a luminescent bolt of cloth, somewhat like a spun aluminum fabric. Thin wires were entangling in it, and about 10 feet away lay 3 fragments of what appeared to have been a dull metal box. Carol knelt at the closest piece, evidently a corner of the box. It was lined with wiring and tubes. "It looks like electronic equipment," decided Carol, peering intently at the strange piece. Bill had approached the second and largest fragment. He carefully turned it over. It was filled with black and yellow fur. "Oh no!" he cried, knowing in a flash, yet denying it in his mind at the same time. Stunned, he stared at the perky ears, the dull staring and unseeing eyes, the leather thongs that held the head and body of a dog to the metal encasement. Carol saw it the next instant. "It's some horrible joke!" she gasped. "It couldn't be the second Russian satellite. It couldn't be Mutnik. My God, no, it couldn't be." Bill kept staring, his thoughts racing. There were rumors of an ejection chamber for Mutnik, but they had been denied by the Russians. But suppose the Russians had planned an ejection chamber for the dog Laika when they launched the satellite and had only denied it after they thought it had failed? But if it had worked, why had it taken so long to find its way to Earth? The satellite itself was supposed to have disintegrated months ago. "Damn," thought Bill, "I wish I were a scientist right now instead of a know-nothing artist." He touched the dog with his toe. It was perfectly preserved, as though it had died just a few hours before. It was rigid, but it had not started to decompose. "Carol, are we crazy? Is this some dream, or do you believe we are looking at the ejection chamber of the Russian satellite?" he asked, doubting even what he was saying. "I don't know." Carol was wide-eyed. "But what shall we do now? We'd better contact the authorities immediately." Bill tried to keep reason from overcoming his disbelief of their discovery. "But how, Carol? Our radio transmitter isn't working. It won't till morning. And there's certainly no other way to communicate with anyone. We can't even take the boat anywhere with the speed we're making. We'll have to wait till morning." "What shall we do with the dog?" asked Carol. "Do you think we ought to bury it?" "Lord, no, Carol. The body of the dog will be extremely valuable to science. We've got to get someone here as quickly as possible." Bill was trying to steady his nerves. "Let's go back and try to raise someone on the radio. Let's try again. It may work," called Carol, running in the direction of the boat. Bill followed her. They stumbled on the craggy rocks and exposed sea grape roots, but together in the darkness they struck out for the boat. Bill was first on board and went directly to the ship-to-shore radio. "Try the Nassau marine operator first," Carol panted as she clambered aboard. "He's a lot closer to us than Miami." As the receiver warmed up, static filled the cabin. Bill depressed the transmitting button. "This is Yacht 7 Seas calling the Nassau marine operator," he called into the phone. Only static answered. "Bill," Carol said in sudden inspiration, "give a mayday. Try every channel with a mayday. If anyone picks up a mayday call, you'll get emergency action." "Mayday, mayday. This is the Yacht 7 Seas. Come in anyone," Bill called urgently into the mouthpiece. He switched to the Coast Guard channel, then to the Miami Marine Operators channel. Only static filled the cabin. No welcome voice acknowledged their distress call. Bill flipped the switch desperately to the 2 ship-to-ship channels. "Mayday, come in any boat." Still static. Nothing but static. It was night, a night without a moon. The island loomed dark against the black waters. The dark was relieved only by a small fire burning at the native settlement a half-mile down the coast, and the cabin lights of the 7 Seas. "What will we do now?" Carol tried to sound unconcerned, but her voice sounded thin and wavering. "I don't know what we can do, except wait until daybreak. I'm sure we can get a signal out then," Bill replied, calmly as he could. He hoped she wouldn't hear the pounding of his heart. "What about the dog?" she asked. "Will it be all right there? Should we bring it aboard?" "We better leave everything untouched. Our best bet is to get some sleep and place our call as soon as day breaks." Neither of them could eat much supper, and after putting the dishes away, they made up their bunks and climbed in. After a very few minutes, Bill handed a lighted cigarette across the narrow chasm between the bunks. "I can't sleep. My head is spinning. Do you really believe that's what we found?" Carol's voice sounded small. "Yes, I do. I believe we've found the Russian ejection unit, complete with a dog Laika and instrumentation." They lay quietly, the glow of two cigarettes occasionally reflecting on the bulkhead. Bill finally arose. "I can't think of another thing but what's sitting out there on Little Harbor Key." He walked up to the main cabin and switched on the RDF. For a few minutes there was music, and then Flash! The United States government has just officially released the news that at 10:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the U.S. satellite ejection chamber was successfully returned to Earth at the designated location. This was some 6 hours earlier than expected. The chamber, into which Robert Joy voluntarily had himself strapped, has landed at an undisclosed site and is being raced under heavy guard to the Walter Reed Hospital at Washington, D.C. There is no hope that Joy is still living. Word has just been released by Dr. James R. Killian that instruments measuring Joy's pulse rate indicated 3 days ago that all Joy's bodily processes ceased to function at that time. We repeat, all hope of the survival of Robert Joy is now abandoned as the result of scientific data just released by Dr. Killian. The satellite is being brought intact to Walter Reed Hospital, and leading physiologists and scientists are racing to the scene to be on hand for the opening of the unit scheduled for 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Further reports will be given as received. This station will remain on the air all night. Stay tuned for further developments. We repeat, the U.S. satellite's ejection chamber, containing the first human being ever to go into space, has been successfully returned to Earth as predicted, though all hope has been abandoned for the survival of Robert Joy, the man in the moon. The chamber will be open for scientific study tomorrow morning. Stay tuned for further news. Bill turned down the music that ensued and returned to his bunk. "You heard that, Carol?" He knew she wasn't asleep. "Yes, and it makes this whole thing that we've found seem more plausible. I've been lying here trying to make myself believe it's some sort of dream, but it isn't. If we could only—" Carol's voice faded softly into the night. There was absolutely nothing they could do. Nothing but lie there and smoke and pretend to sleep. They didn't talk much, and keenly felt the terrible frustration of their enforced silence on the ship to shore. They heard several more news reports and several analyses of the news, but nothing new was added throughout the night. The radio only reiterated that the ejection unit had been recovered, that hope had faded for Joy's survival, and that the chamber was to be opened in the morning as soon as scientists had convened in Washington. Dawn, long in coming, broke about 4:30. With the lifting dark, the sunspots which interfered with the radio reception miraculously lifted also. Bill and Carol sat next to the ship to shore and turned it on. This time they heard the reassuring hum of the transmitter, not drowned out by the awful static of the night before. Bill switched to the Coast Guard channel. "Mayday, Mayday, this is 7 Seas calling the United States Coast Guard. Come in, please." And a voice, almost miraculously, answered, "This is the U.S. Coast Guard. Come in, 7 Seas. What is your position? Come in, 7 Seas. This is the yacht 7 Seas back to the Coast Guard. We are located at the Berry Islands at Little Harbor Key. We want to report the discovery of what we believe to be the second Russian satellite." This is the Coast Guard to the Seven Seas. Do we read you correctly? Are you reporting discovery of the Russian satellite? Please clarify. Over." A stern voice crackled through the speaker. "Last evening on entering the harbor here we saw an object fall to the ground. On inspection it was a metal box which was broken apart on impact. In it are electronic equipment and the body of a small dog. Over." Bill tried to be calm and succinct. "Coast Guard to Seven Seas. Is your boat in distress? Over." "No, no. Did you read me about the Russian satellite?" asked Bill, impatience in his voice. "Will you state your name and address? Will you state the master's full name and the call letters and registration of your craft?" "Over," crackled the voice from the speaker. "Oh, my Lord, we're not going to have red tape at a time like this, are we?" Carroll asked exasperatedly. "This is Bill Anderson of Fort Lauderdale, owner and skipper. Our call letters are William George 3176, Coast Guard registration number 235465483. What are your instructions regarding dog satellite? Please stand by." Bill and Carroll stared at each other while the voice on the radio was silent. "This is the United States Coast Guard calling the yacht Seven Seas. Seven Seas standing by. We wish to remind you that it is illegal and punishable by a fine or imprisonment to issue false reports to the Coast Guard. We are investigating your report and wish you to stand by." "Investigating our report?" Bill fairly shouted into the phone. "Good God, man, the thing to investigate is here, lying in three pieces on the middle of Little Harbor Key. This is no joke." Despite the emotion in Bill's voice, the answer came back routine and cold. "Please stand by. We will call you. Do not, we repeat, do not make further contact anywhere. Please stand by. Coast Guard standing by with Seven Seas." "Seven Seas standing by," shouted Bill, almost apoplectic, his face reddening in anger. "Now what? It looks like they're going to take their time in believing us." "At least until they find out who we are and if we're really here," said Carroll. Bill paced the deck in frustration. Suddenly he decided, "Carroll, you stick with the radio. I'm going ashore again and take another look at our Mutnik. It seems so incredible I'm not even sure of what I saw last night. Once they believe us they'll want to know as much about it as we can tell them." Bill hurriedly put on his swimsuit and heard Carroll shout as he dove overboard, "Hurry back, Bill. I don't like you leaving me here alone." Bill swam with shore-even strokes to the shore where they had gone last night. The water felt cool. It soothed his nerves, which jangled in the excitement of the discovery and in the anger of the disbelieving authorities. He reached shallow water and waded towards the shore. Suddenly he stopped dead, his ankles in 5 inches of water. His eyes stared ahead in disbelief. His brain was numbed. Only his eyes were alive, staring, wide in horror. Finally his brain pieced together the image that his vision sent to it. Pieced it together but made no comprehension of it. His brain told him that there was a blanket of fur laying unevenly 20 feet back from the shoreline. A blanket of yellow and black fur, covering the earth, covering mangrove roots, fitted neatly around the bent palm tree trunks, lying over the rocks that had cut his feet last night, smothering, suffocating, hugging the earth. Bill shut his eyes, and still the vision kept shooting to his brain. All yellow and black and fuzzy, with trees or tall mangrove bush or sea grapevine sticking up here and there. He opened his eyes and wanted to run, for the scene was still there. It hadn't disappeared as a nightmare disappears when you wake up. Thick yellow and black fur lay on the ground like dirty snow, covering everything low, hugging the base of taller things. Run, his mind told him, yet he stood rooted to the spot, staring at the carpet of fur near him. It was only 10 feet away. 10 feet? His every muscle jumped. The lock that had held his muscles and brain in a tight vise gave loose and a flood of realization hit him. "It's moving," he realized in horror. "It's growing." As he watched, slowly, slowly, As the petals of a morning glory unfold before the eye, the yellow and black fur carpet stretched itself in ever increasing perimeter. Saw it approach a rock near the beach. The mind, when confronted with a huge shock, somehow concentrates itself on a small detail. Perhaps it tries to absorb itself in a small thing because the whole thing is too great to comprehend all at once. So with Bill's mind. He saw the yellow and black fur grow toward the rock. It seemed to ooze around it and then up and over the top of it. Bill saw, when it reached the top of the rock, that it dropped a spiny tendril into the ground. Like a root, the tendril buried itself into the earth below the jutting rock, and slowly the rock was covered with the growing fur. Bill's thoughts sped ahead of his reason. The dog, growing like a plant. Its hide covering the ground, putting out roots, suffocating everything, smothering everything, growing. With almost superhuman effort, he turned his back on the awful sight and swam desperately out to the seven seas. "Bill, what's happened?" cried Carol when she saw his white and terrified face. "Carol, the dog! It must have had some cosmic reaction to its cellular structure, some cancerous reaction. When the chamber broke open and the cells were exposed to our atmosphere again, it started some action, started to grow, doesn't stop growing. It's horrible." Bill's words were disjointed and hysterical. Carol stared at him. "Bill, what are you saying?" Bill pointed mutely to the shore. Carol rushed to the cockpit. She stared at the island. She ran back to the cabin where Bill was sitting, holding his head in his hands. She grabbed the binoculars from the bookshelf and turned them to the island. "Bill, oh no! The whole island looks as though it's covered with fur!" she screamed. Bill grabbed the binoculars and ranged the island with them. A quarter of a mile down he could see small figures in the water, floundering around, climbing aboard the two fishing smacks. All around, the black and yellow mounds of fur carpeted the pretty green island with a soft rug of yellow and black. "Get the Coast Guard, Carol." "They called back while you were gone. They're sending a plane over immediately." "Call them, Carol," Bill shouted at her. "Don't you realize what this could mean? Don't you realize that something, only God knows what, has happened to the cellular structure of this animal, has turned it into a voracious plant-like thing that seems to grow and grow once it hits our atmosphere? Don't you realize that today they're going to open that satellite, that other one in Washington? Suppose this is what happens when living tissue is exposed to cosmic rays, or whatever's up there. Don't you see what could happen?" Bill was hoarse from fright and shouting. "Smother everything, grow and smother." Carol was at the ship to shore. "What time is it, Carol?" "I don't know. 5:30, I guess." "They plan to open the ejection chamber at 6. We've got to tell them what happened here before they open it. Hurry with the damned Coast Guard." "Mayday, mayday! Coast Guard, come in. This is the Seven Seas. Come in and hurry. Coast Guard to the Seven Seas, come in." Bill grabbed the phone. "Listen carefully," he said in a quiet, determined voice. "This is God's own truth. I repeat, this is God's own truth. The remains of the dog we discovered last night have started to grow. It's growing as we look at it. It has covered the entire island as far as we can see, with fur. Stinking yellow and black fur. We've got to get word to Washington before they open up the satellite. The same thing could happen there. Do you understand? I must get in touch with Washington immediately." There was no mistaking the urgency and near panic in Bill's voice. The Coast Guard returned with, "We understand you, Seven Seas. We will clear a line directly to Dr. Killian in Washington. Stand by." With his hand shaking, Bill turned on the standard broadcast band of the portable RDF. A voice cut in. "Latest reports from Walter Reed General Hospital, where the first human-manned satellite ejection chamber has just been opened. All leading physiologists and physicists were assembled at the hospital by midnight last night, and plans to open the ejection chamber at 6 a.m. this morning were moved up. The chamber was opened at 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time today. Our first report confirmed that volunteer moon traveler, the man in the moon, Robert Joy, was no longer alive. Hope had been abandoned for him some 80 hours previous, when recording instruments on his body processes indicated no reactions. Of scientific curiosity is the fact that though dead for more than 3 days, his body is in a perfect state of preservation. Flash, we interrupt this special newscast for a late bulletin. The body of Robert Joy has begun to shoot out unexplained appendages, like rapidly growing cancerous growths. His integument appears to be enlarging, growing away from his body. "Hello, Seven Seas," broke in the ship to shore. "We are still trying to locate Dr. Killian." The Shining Cow by Alex James. This is not a story about sinister aliens from outer space. This is simply the story of what happened to poor Junius when she found herself much too close to a flying saucer, long enough so she could be analyzed and long enough to cause some strange happenings on that farm. Robbie whined and acted like his eyes were burning, as if he'd gotten dust or something even stranger into them. Jack Stewart stared deeply into the bottom of his cracked coffee cup as his wife began to gather the breakfast dishes. Mrs. Stewart was a huge, methodical woman, seasoned to the drudgery of a farm wife. Quite methodically she'd arise every morning at 4 a.m., with her husband, and each would do their respective chores until long after the sun had set on their 40-acre farm. "You've just got to find Junius today, Zach." Mrs. Stewart spoke worriedly. "Lord only knows her condition, not being milked since yesterday." "Yeah, I know, Ma," Zach said wearily as he rose from the table. "I'll search for her again in the North Woods, but if she ain't there this time, I give up." A dog suddenly howled outside. There was a brief instant when neither moved. Then Zach suddenly exclaimed, "It's Robbie!" and dashed outside. In the light from the open doorway Zach saw the dog creeping along on his haunches, howling and whining, and scratching frantically at his tear-streaming eyes. "Skunk finally got you, eh, boy?" Zach spoke sympathetically as the dog, fawning, came closer. "Stay away, Robbie, stay away now," he ordered the dog. Robbie whined and scratched again, furiously. Zach sniffed cautiously, expecting any moment the pungent smell of skunk fluid to hit his nostrils. He sensed nothing but the clean, fresh smell of the morning air, so he leaned closer. Within a foot of Robbie he sniffed again. Nothing. He realized it wasn't a skunk that caused Robbie's eyes to burn. He knelt down and took the dog's head tenderly in his rough, calloused hands and examined his eyes. They were bloodshot and watery. He took some water from the well and dashed it into the dog's eyes as Robbie struggled. "Hold still, boy, I'm trying to help you," Zach soothed. He took out a blue work bandana and wiped tenderly around Robbie's eyes. "What did it, boy? How did it happen?" Zach asked. Robbie merely whined. "What's wrong with him?" Mrs. Stewart, broom in hand, asked from the doorway. "Don't rightly know." Zach patted the dog. "Acts like he's got something in his eyes." "Skunk?" "Nah." Zach shook his head. "He don't smell. Something else." "Cat?" "No scratches either. He acts like they're burning him, like he got dust or something in him." "We'll take him out to the barn, and you better get after Junius." "Yeah, Ma. Come on, Robbie." He led Robbie to the barn and made him lie on a bed of hay in one of the stalls, then returned to the kitchen for his lantern. He put on his thick denim jacket and work cap and turned to his wife. "If she ain't in the woods, I'll come back and get the truck and drive over to the Lemurs and see if he's seen her." He left the kitchen and shone the lantern around the farmyard to get his bearings, then headed for the north end of his farm. He could see the faint glimmer of dawn in the east, more pronounced in the northeast, and even more so due north. He rubbed his eyes. A much brighter glow outlined the tree tops in the north woods that made the dawn on the eastern horizon look like a dirty gray streak. His first thought was of fire, but there was no smoke, no flame. Zach walked dazedly toward the woods, his eyes glued to the light above the trees. Soon he was in the woods, and he could see the brightness extended down through the trees from the sky, on the other side of the woods. He approached cautiously as the light grew brighter, and came to the clearing where it was most intense. A thick bush obstructed his view, and Zach moved it aside, then uttered a hoarse gasp, as he clutched at his eyes. For a moment he felt he was dreaming. He squinted between the slits of his fingers. The glow was still piercing, but he could see the brightly lit Junius radiating blue-white light, nibbling at the sparse grass in the clearing. Zach stood transfixed, his eyes widening behind his fingers. He felt the tears and the burning sensation, and squinted tightly, turning his head from the unbelievable scene. Zach didn't remember his return to the farmhouse, or incoherently trying to explain to his wife the scene he had witnessed. A stiff jolt of elderberry wine drove off the jitters, and reasoning returned. His wife sat patiently, eyeing him oddly, as Zach muttered over and over again, "It's unbelievable! It's unbelievable!" Mrs. Stewart rose. "I'm going out and see for myself. And Zach, if you're lying to me—" Zach jumped from the chair, barring her way. "Believe me, Ma, it's true. Don't go out there. It might be too much for you." "It's the craziest thing I've ever heard," Mrs. Stewart scoffed. "A cow that shines like the sun." "Look, Ma, will you just come with me as fur as the pasture? You can see the glow from there, and maybe that might convince you." "Yes, yes, I will." Mrs. Stewart jerked off her apron. "I declare, Zach, I think these chores are getting the best of you." They walked to the pasture, their eyes on the tree tops of the north woods. A faint glow began to appear. "See, see," Jack pointed, laughing crazily. "Let's get closer. Looks like a fire," Mrs. Stewart said. "Ain't no fire." Zach's tone was angry. "It's Junius, and she's all lit up like a Christmas tree." "Zach, now you stop that kind of crazy talk. There's a reason behind everything, and I'm sure there's one for this." "There's a reason, Ma. Junius. She got the whole clearing lit up like a noonday sun. Lord only knows how she got that way, but she's shining out there like a great big light bulb, only brighter." Mrs. Stewart quickened her pace toward the clearing. "I'm going to see for myself," she said determinedly, "and put an end to this foolish nonsense." "All right, Ma," Zach spoke resignedly, "if your mind's set. But I'm warning you, you better squint your eyes tight. She's too bright to look at. Poor Robbie must have got too good a look at her." Mrs. Stewart approached the clearing ahead of her husband, and moved the same bush aside that had obstructed her husband's view. Her gaze caught the brightly radiating figure of Junius, and Mrs. Stewart screamed, clasping her face with her hands. Zach had his head turned, but he groped for his wife, grasped her arm, and led her from the clearing. "It's too crazy to believe, Zach," she whispered in awe. "What are we going to do? What has happened to poor Junius?" "I don't know what happened to her," Zach answered, "but I know what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to call the university and get them scientist fellows down here." "You suppose they can get close enough to milk the poor thing?" Mrs. Stewart clasped her hands in frustration. "She's probably in misery." Zach shook his head. "Ain't no tellin' what they're liable to do after they seen her. Most likely they'll want to ship her to the university to examine her and see how she got that way." "Why don't we call the veterinarian?" Mrs. Stewart asked. "It might be some kind of new disease." "Ain't no disease, Ma. It's something nobody in the world has ever seen or heard of before. I just hope I can convince them university fellows to come down here. Don't you think you better tie Junius so she won't stray?" "Better wait and see what them scientists say. Besides, if she strays, all we got to do is follow the light." Zach did the most important chores, and at 8 a.m. on the dot he called the university. The operator at the switchboard answered sleepily. "Good morning, State University." "Morning, ma'am. I'd like to talk to one of them scientist fellows." "To whom in particular do you wish to speak?" "Any of them that ain't busy. I got something important to tell them." "If I knew what it was about," the operator was becoming irritated, "I'd connect you with the right party." Zach hesitated, reluctant to give his startling news to a mere operator. Instead, he hedged. Well, who would have charge of things that lit up? "Oh, you want the electrical engineering lab. Just a moment, sir." There was a series of clicks and buzzes in the earpiece, then Zach heard a man's deep voice. "Hello?" "Hello," Zach replied. "This the electrical engineering lab?" "Yes, sir, that's right." "Well, my name is Zach Stewart, and I own a 40-acre farm on the Canal Road, just outside of Smithville. I'm Professor Donnell. Can I help you?" "Yeah." Zach took a deep breath, then began. "My cow Junius was missing since yesterday morning, and this morning when I went out to search for her again, I found her." "Mr. Stewart," Professor Donnell's voice was impatient, "I'm a very busy man with a heavy class schedule. Why in the world would I care if you found your cow or not?" "You'd care if you knew how I found her." "All right, Mr. Stewart. How did you find your cow? With some new kind of radar?" "No, sir. I found her by following the bright light in the north wood, and when I got there, there was Junius, lit up like a neon sign." "Mr. Stewart, are you drunk?" "I knew you wouldn't believe me. All I can say is, come see for—" Zach heard a sudden click, then an immediate buzzing. Professor Donnell had hung up. He had no sooner replaced the phone when there was a pounding on the door. He opened it and saw 6 state troopers and 4 important-looking gentlemen in civilian dress. A trooper who looked as though he might be in charge spoke to Zach. "Sir, we don't want you or your wife to get panicky, but we have reason to believe that something strange is going on in your woods. These men are from the Atomic Research Laboratory at the university, and they are convinced that a flying saucer has landed out there." "It ain't no flying saucer," Zach spoke wearily. "It isn't?" one of the gentlemen asked, disappointed. "Then what is it?" "It's Junius, my cow." "Your what?" the state trooper exclaimed incredulously. "Are you nuts?" Angrily, Zach jerked his thumb in the direction of the north woods. "Just go out there and see for yourself, and then tell me I'm nuts." They hurriedly left the house, looking back skeptically at Zach. Zach and his wife stood in the doorway, watching them till they were out of sight in the woods. "You watch 'em come bustling back here in a minute, Ma." In a few moments they saw the men scrambling out of the woods, rushing madly for the house, holding their eyes. "Now I don't have to convince anybody," Zach smirked. By the time they reached the porch, they were all talking excitedly and rubbing their eyes. The state trooper in charge pulled Zach aside. "Mister," he said ominously, "what the hell happened to that cow?" "I don't know." Zach spoke with sarcasm. "Just the way I found her." The important-looking civilian bustled past the patrolman and confronted Zach. "I'd like to use your phone." His hands moved nervously. "Where is it?" Zach showed him, and the man rushed to it and hastily dialed a number. "This is Professor Jonathan Sims, nuclear physicist at State University. Put me through immediately to the governor. It's very important." There was a slight pause as Sims drummed impatiently on the phone. "Hello? Hello, Governor. Professor Sims. I'd like a contingent of National Guardsmen around the farm of Zach Stewart on the old Canal Road. A most astounding thing has happened out here. For the welfare of the public, I urgently request this farm be placed under tight security check at once and the federal government notified immediately." "Hey now, wait a minute, mister," Zach protested. Sims motioned him into silence, his ear glued to the phone. "Sir," he hesitated, glancing at the group sideways, "you won't believe this until you see it, but we have positive proof a saucer has landed here. Mr. Stewart's cow is radiating intense blue and white light, the kind that has been associated with the glow of flying saucers." Sims paused, listening to the governor. Zach saw him fidget and stick a forefinger in his collar. "Honestly, sir, I'm not drunk. The cow is radiating light." "See?" Zach grinned at him. "Now you know how I felt." Sims ignored him, concentrating on the phone. "Yes, sir, there is a state trooper here." He turned to the one in charge. "He wants to speak to you." The trooper took the receiver. "Hello, Governor." Sergeant Les Johnson of the Highway Patrol. Pause. That's right, sir. There's a number of people here who can swear to it. Yes, sir. This time the trooper fidgeted. I seen it too. Blue-white light. Yes, sir. No, sir, we are not having a drinking party. The light was reported by the pilot of Continental Airways early this morning, and we investigated. Yes, sir. He held the receiver toward Sims. He wants to talk to you again. The governor was finally convinced something indeed strange was happening at the Stewart place, but being a solid citizen and faithful servant of the people who elected him, he couldn't believe the fantastic story the professor and the trooper told him. He decided to see for himself and rang for his chauffeur after his telephone conversation with Professor Sims. Meanwhile, Mrs. Stewart turned to Sims. Will you please tell us if Junius can be milked? I really don't know yet, Mrs. Stewart. I'll have to investigate the area for harmful radioactivity first. Then I'll have to check the cow herself. Pardon me. He turned to the phone again. Trying to keep his voice and emotion under control, Professor Sims called his laboratory at the university and ordered among other technical equipment a Geiger counter, a gamma-ray detector, a portable lead shield, body and temperature thermometers, a portable X-ray machine, and a dozen pairs of smoke glasses. The equipment arrived within the hour, and Professor Sims distributed it among his assistants with his instructions. It was understood that he alone would approach Junius, wearing his smoke glasses and carrying the protective lead shield, to make the initial test. If his test proved that Junius could be safely approached, he would go back for the others. You look like one of them flying saucer fellas yourself, Zach laughed, seeing Professor Sims donned in the lead shield and the dark glasses. Sims waved at the crowd in the farmyard and walked awkwardly toward the glow in the north wood, less pronounced now in the daylight. They watched until his retreating figure disappeared into the woods, and they were still watching the spot for what seemed a long time afterward. One of the assistants fidgeted and looked at his watch. He's been in there 20 minutes. Wonder what he's doing. I hope he's milking her, Mrs. Stewart said hopefully. Zach chuckled as a thought struck him. What's so funny, Zach? His wife asked. Junius, Zach's chuckle bubbled into laughter, will be the first cow to give radiated milk. Finally, after another 15 minutes, they saw Professor Sims emerge from the woods. As he came across the pasture, they could see that his smoke glasses were propped above his eyebrows, and he was concentrating on a small notebook in his hand, shaking his head from time to time. When he finally joined the waiting group, he was flooded with questions. He gestured them into silence. Please, I cannot answer any questions as yet until I have consulted with my assistants. Sergeant Johnson, will you please have your men guard the clearing while we hold a conference? Is it safe to get that close to her? The trooper asked, unbelieving. I can assure you that it is. There is just a negligible amount of radioactivity present, and no more ultraviolet rays than there are in an average sun lamp. But you must wear your glasses. Turning to his aides, he said, Come, gentlemen, and they followed him into the farmhouse. Can she be milked? Mrs. Stewart wailed after them. What a god-awful situation, Zach muttered, grabbing a pitchfork and heading for the barn. The scientists seated themselves around the big dining room table and faced Professor Sims. Gentlemen, this is the most amazing thing that ever happened. The cow is glowing out there like a miniature atomic pile, and under the circumstances as we know them, should be deader than a doornail. But there she stands, shining like the morning sun, chewing her cud and just mooing away as if nothing happened. What is your theory, Professor? One of the assistants asked. I have one, but it's utterly fantastic, Sims answered. So is that cow out there. Let's hear it. Do you remember how much more frequent saucer sightings were reported in this area alone? Sims asked. All the assistants nodded their heads. Well, Sims went on, I am of the opinion that a saucer actually landed out there and they came across the cow by accident. They either shot her with some sort of radium ray gun or some luminous substance unknown to us." "Why didn't Junius die?" one of the assistants asked. Sims shook his head. "They wished to examine her. You see, gentlemen, whatever it was, it served a threefold purpose. It made her luminous, immobile, and," Sims placed both hands on the table and leaned forward for emphasis, "transparent." There was a gasp and exclamations. "Transparent? How?" "I was within a foot of the cow, felt her hide, and through the glasses I could see the skeletal frame, the chest cavity, the heart beating within, the entire intestinal tract, much, much more clearly than could be seen by the best X-ray." As if on command, the assistants all rose simultaneously. "Sit down, gentlemen. The cow isn't going anywhere. We shall have to face this situation with sound scientific reasoning. There will be a closed van here soon to pick up Junius and haul her to the laboratory where we can examine her more thoroughly. Now my belief is that the saucer took off in haste, with such great haste that they forgot to extinguish poor Junius. I believe they will be back looking for her, therefore we shall have to return her tonight and conceal ourselves around the area and watch." "Splendid idea, Professor Sims," one of the assistants exclaimed. Yelling voices in the farmyard caught their attention. They saw Sergeant Johnson through the dining room window, coming across the yard, yelling and pointing to the sky. Sims rushed from the house, met Johnson, grasped him by the shoulders, shaking him. "What happened, man? What happened?" Sims asked. Black light! Black light!" Johnson shouted, pointing skyward. Sims looked up. Nothing but the serene blue of the summer sky, and occasional bird caught his eye. Sims shook him again, more roughly. "Speak, man! What happened?" "Black light flashed down on the cow. Blackest light you ever saw!" The group gathered round him in the yard, trying to make sense out of what he said. So engrossed were they with his babblings that none but Mrs. Stewart was aware of the fact that Junius had entered the farmyard and was eyeing them curiously. "Junius!" she exclaimed. "Moo!" The crowd looked up to see the ordinary, unlit Junius standing calmly by the gate. "Hurry and get the milk pail, Zach. Junius is all right now." Mrs. Stewart yelled happily to her husband as Professor Sims and his assistants led the hysterical trooper into the house. High over the horizon, a faint, silvery disk was disappearing at fantastic speed to outer space.